In geopolitics, there is only one sin you cannot commit. It is not starting a war. It is not even losing one. It is making a threat you cannot back up. Right now, the United States is amassing an armada in the Persian Gulf. Thousands of Marines are sailing toward Iran's coastline. Tanks are being unloaded. The Fifth Fleet is moving into tactical formation. It looks like the prelude to an invasion. But if you look closely, you will see a superpower that has run out of options, backed into a corner by its own red lines, staring down an adversary that has spent 48 years preparing for this exact moment. And that adversary just proved a very dangerous point. Iran does not bluff. Let's look at what is happening on the water. According to official deployments, the United States has accelerated its military buildup in the region. Earlier this year, around 2,500 Marines from the 31st Marine Expeditionary Unit moved into the area aboard the USS Tripoli. Now the Pentagon is sending an additional 2,500 Marines with the USS Boxer Amphibious Ready Group, alongside the USS Portland and USS Comstock. In total, roughly 5,000 Marines are converging on the Persian Gulf. M1 Abrams tanks and Stryker vehicles are also being positioned in Gulf countries. Officially, this is about deterrence, but a senior U.S. official, speaking to the Jerusalem Post, framed it as an inevitability. In his remarks, the official said, "Those Marines aren't coming for decoration." He also said Washington may have no other choice but to launch a ground operation to seize Iran's Kharg Island. Kharg Island is Iran's primary oil export hub. Roughly 90% of its crude shipments pass through there. If the U.S. wants to open the Strait of Hormuz and choke the Iranian economy, Kharg is the target. But here is the problem. Kharg Island is located a mere 30 kilometers off the Iranian coast. In military terms, 30 kilometers is not projection of power. It is a shooting gallery. According to military analysts, placing 5,000 Marines on a fixed island 30 kilometers from an enemy coastline is creating a hostage situation. They will be sitting ducks, as one U.S. official puts it. A former CENTCOM commander, speaking to Reuters, put it bluntly, placing thousands of troops on a fixed island makes them vulnerable to saturation fire from the mainland. So why would the U.S. do something so obviously risky? Because maybe capturing Kharg is not the goal. Maybe it is the pretext. With the lives of those sitting ducks will come the ultimate casus belli for the U.S., a justification for a full-scale ground invasion. But here is the reality Iran wants you to understand. Iran knows this. They are not panicking. They are preparing to collect the payment. To understand why this buildup is happening now, you have to go back a few days. President Trump issued an ultimatum. He threatened to strike Iran's power plants if Tehran did not bend. Iran responded with a daring statement. A senior Iranian official boldly told media that the entire region will go dark if Iran's energy infrastructure is attacked. Earlier, IRGC had claimed that Tehran now controls the skies of Israel. It was a statement strong enough to force Trump to reconsider his options. And just like that, the ultimatum evaporated. Trump backfooted. Shortly after backpedaling, President Trump took to social media with a phrase that was meant to sound Churchillian: peace through strength. A slogan with history. Reagan used it to define an era, the Cold War's end, achieved without firing a single shot. The words were meant to convey resolve so absolute that the adversary breaks before the battle begins. But here, in 2026, peace through strength is being invoked by a president who just launched a war he no longer controls. A president who made a threat, blinked, and then tried to wrap his retreat in the language of Reagan's victory. The irony is so thick you could cut it with a hypersonic glide. Words like that don't hide weakness, they advertise it. Because Trump knew what Israel learned a week ago. Iran does not bluff. When Israel targeted Iran's South Pars gas field, Iran did not respond with diplomatic protests. It responded by hitting Israeli oil fields and other major oil and gas infrastructure across the region. The escalation was swift, painful, and precise. President Trump had to pull Netanyahu's leash to de-escalate. In the cold world of geopolitics, making a threat and then not delivering is not just weakness, it is strategic humiliation. But there is a twist that some Iranian officials have quietly noted. What if Trump's empty threat was not incompetence? What if it was deliberate? A senior Iranian source pointed out that the 48-hour ultimatum charade sent oil prices down by 6% in a matter of days. And right before launching any major military action, the United States loves cheap oil. Lower prices at the pump matter more to midterm voters than any foreign policy victory. So the bluff may have been a market play, a cynical, cold-blooded calculation to stabilize energy prices before moving the fleet into position. If that was the plan, it worked, temporarily, but it came at a cost, because you only get to bluff so many times before nobody believes you anymore. Let's take a step back and look at the broader strategic picture. For years, the United States has pursued what it calls maximum pressure against Iran. Sanctions, airstrikes, decapitation attempts against senior commanders. The assassination of Supreme Leader was supposed to break Iran's will. None of it worked. So much so that Washington has quietly lifted sanctions on roughly $14 billion worth of Iranian oil. Why? Because Brent crude hit $114 a barrel. The U.S. stock market lost $1 trillion in value, and since the onset of the war, the U.S. stock index crashed nearly 6%, wiping out over $3 trillion in total wealth. Investors have realized there will be no quick victory. The markets are pricing in a long, ugly conflict. To retreat now would be total strategic defeat. The only way to save face is to push forward. And that is exactly what the administration is doing. Amassing troops, moving the fleet into tactical formation, putting the pieces in place for a strike that will, in the words of that senior U.S. official, leave the Marines on Kharg, not there for decoration. So let's talk about what happens if those Marines actually land. The official justification would be to seize Kharg Island, open the Strait of Hormuz, and choke Iran's own oil sales. It sounds like a classic amphibious operation. However, with the Pentagon asking for $200 billion, military theorists predict there could be another logic at work, the tripwire, the full-scale mainland invasion of Iran. Here's the problem with that plan. A US-based think tank calculated that a mainland invasion of Iran would require between 1.7 and 2.2 million troops. Even optimistic estimates put the number at 500,000. In either case, casualties are projected to exceed 100,000. Why so many? Because Iran is not Iraq. It is 4 times bigger, and it is a natural fortress. The Zagros Mountains cover the south, the Alpers Mountains cover the north. Every canyon is a pre-sighted kill zone. Every peak hides a mobile missile battery that satellites cannot track. And here's the detail that US war planners do not like to discuss publicly. Iran is not a capital-centric nation. For 48 years, Tehran has been preparing for exactly this kind of invasion. They have built a decentralized military and command structure, what they call the mosaic defense. There is no single headquarters to bomb, no single leader to decapitate. The command nodes are dispersed across 31 independent provincial networks. If you take out one, the other 30 continue fighting. This is a military designed to fight an asymmetric war of attrition. It is built to absorb punishment, bleed an invading force, and wait for the adversary's political will to collapse. Now, let's talk about what Iran would actually use to defend that 30-kilometer coastline. The United States has the most technologically advanced military in history. It has Aegis destroyers, Patriot batteries, and soon the Iron Beam laser system. To begin with, Iran has their notorious hypersonic missiles, such as Fateh-2, which, unlike traditional ballistic missiles, follows an unpredictable arc and flies at Mach 15, making interception nearly impossible, since the Aegis and Patriot systems are designed to calculate an intercept point based on a steady trajectory. When the target refuses to follow a steady trajectory, those billion-dollar defenses become obsolete. But here is the crucial point that gets lost in the hype about hypersonics. You do not need a Mach 15 missile to hit a target 30 kilometers offshore. For the Marines on Kharg, the real threat is not the Fateh-2. It is the Zulfikar, a high-speed, short-range ballistic missile that can cover the distance from the Iranian coast to Kharg in seconds. There is no human reaction time. There is no defense. The missile arrives before the radar even registers the launch. And, if that were not enough, Iran has vast stockpiles of artillery, rockets, and drones that it has not yet had to use. These are not million-dollar precision weapons. They are cheap, mass-produced, and available in quantities that would exhaust any interceptor inventory the U.S. Navy can bring to the Gulf. These projectiles can be launched from anywhere deep within the mountains and are hard to detect and destroy. The Pentagon has been waiting for the Iron Beam laser system to provide a low-cost counter to rockets and drones, but in the humid, dusty salt air of the Persian Gulf, those lasers are failing. Dust scatters the beam, salt corrodes the optics. The revolutionary defense is not ready for the environment where it matters most. It is starting to look more like Iron Beam loser system. Meanwhile, Iran has moved to autonomous swarming drones. These are not remote-controlled toys. The latest spec drones use onboard AI to identify high-value targets, radar dishes, fuel bunkers, command centers, without any signal from a pilot. Electronic jamming becomes useless because there is no signal to jam. The drone simply identifies its target and executes the mission autonomously. Add to that Iran's silent coastal defense. They use passive sensors that emit no signals. They track U.S. ships without the ships ever knowing they are being watched. By the time a Navy commander realizes his vessel is in a targeting solution, the decision has already been made. And then there are the underground cities. Miles of tunnels carved into the Zagros Mountains, where missile launchers are hidden so deep that U.S. bunker busters cannot reach them. Iran does not need to protect its launch sites with air defense when the launch sites are buried under hundreds of meters of solid rock. All of this technology is impressive, but the real weapon is the terrain. The Zagros Mountains are not just mountains, they are a natural meat grinder. Imagine an invading force trying to move armor through narrow canyons with high ground on both sides. Every ridgeline is a pre-registered artillery position. Every tunnel exit is a kill zone. And the Iranians have had 48 years to map these fields of fire. And because the military is decentralized, there is no single offensive to stop. If the US destroys a missile battery in one canyon, 3 more open fire from the next canyon over. If a commander is killed, his deputy takes over instantly. The network is designed to survive decapitation. This is what the mosaic defense really means. It is not a static line of fortifications. It is a distributed system that fragments the battlefield into hundreds of small, independent engagements. In each engagement, the defender has the advantage of terrain, preparation, and local supply lines. The attacker has to bring everything across an ocean. Iran is not a capital-centric nation. Tehran could fall, and the war would continue. The command nodes would relocate to Isfahan, to Mashhad, to the underground facilities beneath the mountains. The military is structured to fight without a capital, without a central headquarters, without the kind of single point of failure that U.S. strategy has relied on since World War II. The U.S. is amassing 5,000 Marines off the coast of Iran. They are looking at the fortress, and they are looking for a way to win. But Iran is looking at those 5,000 Marines, and they are calculating something else entirely. They are calculating the price of failure. 30 kilometers. That is the distance from the Iranian coast to Kharg Island. 30 kilometers of open water that a billion-dollar destroyer cannot defend. 30 kilometers that turns the most advanced amphibious force in history into a static target. In the world of geopolitics, there is only one rule. You do not make a threat you cannot deliver, and you do not anchor your fleet 30 kilometers from an enemy that has spent 48 years waiting for you to try. Iran does not bluff, and if Washington pushes forward, they are about to learn that lesson. And this time, there will be no stopping. There will only be the sound of artillery from the Zagros Mountains and the quiet satisfaction of a fortress that has finally been tested and found unbreakable.